you don't know the difference between vision and eyesight, then you will by the end of today's episode of the Nutrition Heretic podcast. Holistic optometrist Dr. Sam Berne is our guest heretic this week, and he'll teach us how vision can be improved with nutrition, lifestyle, sunlight, and exercise. Plus, he'll discuss the role of vision in conditions like ADHD and answer a listener's question about glaucoma. Coming up next.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
If you're still confused about what to eat and not getting the results you thought you'd get by going organic, go to nutritionheretic.com and download the shit list of 7 health foods to avoid like the plague for free. The shit list details what health food companies want you to believe about the crap they peddle and why the real foods they're meant to replace are far better. Stop letting big health food dump all over you and download the shit list today.
Fat is bad for you.
I just pop a pill and I'm fine.
Meat is murder.
It's time for bad food punishment. It's time for real nourishment. It's time for the Nutrition Heretic.
The following program is provided as information only and may not be construed as medical or health advice. It is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease. No action or inaction should be taken solely on the basis of the information provided here. Please consult with a licensed healthcare professional or doctor on any matter relating to your health and well-being. Aloha and welcome to the Nutrition Heretic podcast. This is Adrienne Hugh, the Nutrition Heretic. And today, as you know, all of our guests seem to stem from something that happened in my life. And when I was about 10 years old, actually 9 years old, my eyes started to go bad. And luckily, I lived in New York City, and my parents actually worked on 23rd Street, actually in the subway. My dad owned a jewelry store, and about 3 blocks away was the New York optometry school. My mom took me there for glasses, but because of my age, one of the things that they did is they gave me eye strengthening exercises that I could do. 1 year later, I was free of glasses, and I didn't need them again until I took a job in my early 20s. First of all, I wasn't eating very well. College kids and all that stuff. So, but also it was just, I thought I was doing the right thing. I was actually doing the food pyramid, but my eyes got worse. I was working under a lot of fluorescent light throughout the day, and I was only on the 3rd floor facing Grand Central Station. So you can imagine that, that light was fine. Interestingly enough, before that job, I worked on the 26th floor, overlooking the Hudson, and my eyes were fine because we got so much natural light. At least that's what I attribute it to. Because of my history with the eye exercises, I was reluctant to wear my glasses all the time. The eye doctor told me I should wear them all the time. I only wore them when I needed them. And because, for one thing, they actually kind of hurt my face to have them on all the time. But I think that they also strained my eyes, and they didn't. I want to say that they made my eyes feel lazier. And today's expert is going to talk to us about that. And then all these years, I have been using my glasses just for driving and important things like that, until my daughter stepped on my glasses and broke them for good. And I realized that I could drive and do a lot of other things without my glasses even though every optometrist I went to over the years had told me, I'm now 48, had told me that there was something, that if I didn't wear my glasses every day, my eyes were going to be worse, and just be prepared. You don't think your eyes are getting worse. And none of them could ever find anything worse about my eyes over the 20 years. And that brings me to our guest today, because I'm gonna skip over the slightly racist optometrist that I saw not that long ago, who prescribed glasses and then got angry at me that he filled the prescription wrong. But our guest heretic today is Dr. Sam Berne. He is a holistic optometrist, and he's also the author of Creating Your Personal Vision, a mind-body guide for better eyesight. Welcome to the show, Dr. Berne.
Thank you, Adrienne. It's great to visit with you.
Oh, thank you. And I was telling him before we got started that he's been like a white whale where I'm like Captain Ahab trying to get him on the show. And he was just so busy because he's helping so many people. And I'm like, I got to talk to this guy because there is another way. And talk to us a little bit about what it means to be a holistic optometrist.
What it means is that I believe that the eyes are an interrelated, interconnected part of the body, and that our eye health is related to our systemic and metabolic and nutritional health, and that we have the ability at any age, even when we become an elder, that we can reverse eye problems. And the standard approach, as you know, is that our eyes are only going to get worse as we age. And, there's this saying that when you turn 40, you need bifocals, 50, you need trifocals, 60, you're going to get cataracts, and 70, you're going to get macular degeneration. And that's kind of what's, presented at a regular eye doctor's office. But in my world, because I've studied things like Chinese medicine and craniosacral therapy and nutrition, that I've actually seen people improve their vision and reverse things like cataracts, glaucoma, macular degeneration just by eating better. So I got sold very early on in my optometry career, and that's my mission.
Well, thank you for saying that, because my last eye doctor appointment, before he got mad at me for telling him that he filled the prescription wrong, he kept saying to me, he kept talking about how mature I am and how, as you have to face it, you're mature. And then I have another friend pestering me to get the surgery. And I'm like, I don't, she's like, I got the surgery, just get it. And I'm saying, no, I'm not, it's, to me, getting eye surgery unnecessarily is sort of like plastic surgery, where it's like, it could turn out okay, but it could turn out really bad. And I only get the one set of eyes. So I'm like really not totally sold on the eye surgeries.
Our prescriptions that we get from the eye doctor are basically an adaptation that we make to the world. And so it's a compensation that our eyes are making. So in nearsightedness, what we do is we pull the world in as to make sense of it. In farsightedness, we push the world away from ourselves. And in astigmatism, we twist the world. So we want to blame faulty vision on a deteriorating eyeball, but it's not the eyeball that's the problem. It's the programming. It's what our brain is telling our eyes that causes the eye structure to change. So when you get, let's say, LASIK surgery, it changes the refraction in the eyeball, but the programming is still there. And so the eye is going to revert back to the prescription before the surgery. So the surgery doesn't work long term. It's a real slippery slope. The best surgery would be cataracts if you have to get it.
Right.
But a lot of the eye surgeries that are done actually create a lot of secondary problems that you don't want to go down that road if you can avoid it. And that's where I come in, because I offer a lot of really great tools to help people improve their vision.
Wow. And I'm so glad that you said that too, because did you ever see the movie Ray?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Sure.
And I watched that, and you remember his little brother, he watched his little brother drown in a wash bucket. And it was maybe a year later that he goes blind. And when I watched that, I thought to myself, because the way they portrayed in the film, he stands there and he's, he doesn't know what to do. He's paralyzed when he sees this happen to his brother. And I kind of wondered if there was a possibility of a relationship between, I saw something and I didn't do something about it. Maybe I don't deserve, the benefit of eyesight, or somehow a psychological trigger to not see what's happening. Is that at all possible that people, when you talk about pushing the world out or drawing it in with your eyesight, is that at all possible that people can almost dictate their eyesight?
Yeah, we know that the mind and our thinking is so strong, and it can change the structure of our body, based on our emotions and our psychological experiences. So, over the years, people have worked with me in the process called vision therapy, which is a physical therapy to re-educate how the eyes and the brain and the body work together. And sometimes a person will remember a certain time in their life when they got their first prescription, and they have some kind of an emotional release or psychological epiphany, and they can immediately read the eye chart again.
Right.
So the question, it's the eyes are the window into the soul, and there's a psycho-emotional component to our vision that, that we have to acknowledge. And if we do that, a lot of times our eyesight can revert back to being normal without the need of glasses or contacts.
Right. Yes, I often ponder whether or not some of these eye, issues, like, for example, let's say nearsightedness, is that we are trying to push the world out. We can't process it, and it's almost like we need to focus our energy inward to cope with the world. And
it's a defense strategy. We basically pull our visual world in to make sense of it because it's so chaotic out there.
Exactly.
And it's interesting when you go to a regular eye doctor, and I was trained this way, so I have compassion for these folks. And I try to bridge with them. But you go to the doctor and you're in the chair and it's a dark room and he or she is flipping the lenses really quickly, which is clear, one or two, and you choose number 2. Well, let's say you're having a bad day. So you're stressed out. You get this lens and you wear it and it makes you dizzy or nauseous, and you go back to the doctor and say, hey, this is making me nauseous. And the doctor says, don't worry, you'll get used to it. No, thank you. I don't want to get used to suppressing nausea because this prescription is too strong. And a lot of people go through that, experience. I did a workshop up in Vancouver a few months ago, and the last day of the workshop, we went around the room and everybody was able to process their last experience with their eye doctor. And we made a list. And so some people were saying, I don't want to fit myself into the doctor's narrow point of view. Or the doctor isn't listening to me. Or, the doctor thinks eye exercises don't work. So there was this whole list of things that people have to process when they go to a regular eye doctor. It's like they're angry, they're frustrated, they're not being met. And
Absolutely.
It's too bad. There's so many people that could be benefited by what I'm promoting, and yet there's a very small percentage of us out there that are promoting holistic health.
Absolutely. And I think when it comes to anything in the body, but I think particularly with the eyes, like you said, for so many optometrists themselves, they're not, if they see the miracles, they're chalking it up to coincidence. Or when I say miracles, the things that they, have kind of railed against over the years, and they've been discouraging people away from those, exercises and therapies.
Well, in my own case, I was 8 years old. I actually had a learning problem and was diagnosed with a learning disability. My mom took me everywhere, and I ended up at an ophthalmologist's office, and I got a pair of nearsighted glasses, didn't really address my learning problem. And every year I got a stronger and stronger prescription. And when I was in my early 30s, I met a holistic eye doctor, and I went to him for about 2 years, and I completely dissolved my nearsighted prescription. Mm-hmm. But two things happened. Number one, I realized that there was a really strong emotional component to my nearsightedness. It was a tension in my eyes. And number two, I had a diagnosis called convergence insufficiency, where my two eyes didn't work together. Well, after repairing that in the eye therapy, my reading and learning skyrocketed, and I said, man, I want to go into this. And so I helped lots of kids over the years with the same learning problems. And then it kind of morphed into things like autism and ADHD, because some of those kids have undetected vision problems that, they see the eye chart at 20 feet just fine, but they have problems using their eyes together like I did. Mm-hmm. So you don't get the testing, you just go into the special education classes and, it's lost. And so the idea is that we want to recognize that our eyes are so interrelated to our brain. In fetal development, the eyes actually come from brain tissue. So when the eyes, we're working with an extension of the brain. So what we eat, how we think, how we move, what our posture is, all of those things go into kind of developing how our visual system is processing information.
Wow. Yeah. And I had something similar with my eye, I kind of think of it as a metaphor for the fact that I'm always looking out there. I'm always, interested in what's going on around me. So as a child, I was actually farsighted when all my other friends were nearsighted. And I think part of that is because I always want to know what's on the other side of the fence, like a goat. So do you make a distinction between vision and eyesight?
Of course, yes. So eyesight is a static measurement where you're sitting in a room and you're looking at 20 feet. And the measurement is called 20/20, which is seeing a one-third inch letter at 20 feet. That's eyesight. Mm-hmm. Vision is how the eyes and the brain and the body work together. So eyesight is one aspect of vision, but in most eye exams, they check for eyesight and eye health, and they stop there.
Right. But they use the word vision interchangeably.
It's actually incorrect because vision is a dynamic set of skills that are learned and developed. And actually, you start developing them very early in life as an infant, as a toddler, because movement starts stimulating things like your peripheral vision, your eye tracking, your fixation, your eye contact. So if you don't move or your posture's off, or let's say you've had a birth trauma as an example, a lot of times that stops your visual development. And this creates problems later on in learning to read, reading to learn, processing information. So there's a whole developmental spin in what vision really is. I say that vision is more than an eyeball experience.
I like that. So what are some of our biggest threats to vision right now in the modern age? Maybe, for example, we know screen time. As I stare into my screen, we know that screen time has an impact. But what are some of the other things? Like when I talked about fluorescent lights overhead, are those impacting us negatively in any way?
There's been some great research done over the years with children who sit all day in the classroom under fluorescent lights, and they have much more hyperactivity. Their immune systems are lowered, so they have more sickness, and they have more dental problems. So, we could talk about the benefits of light and being in the sunlight. Probably the biggest thing going on right now in terms of eye disease is the number one cause of blindness is macular degeneration. And the macula is the center part of the retina where we see detail and color vision, and more people are developing macular degeneration because it's due to oxidative stress and inflammation and toxicities. And so the digital devices also throw off something called blue light, and that blue white light actually accelerates the deterioration of the macula. So antioxidants, lutein, zeaxanthin, beta-carotene, all the things that you talk about, fish oil and, the amino acids, taurine, and then bilberry. We need to make sure not only are we eating them, but are we digesting them? Because I've seen a connection between our intestinal health and our eye health.
That makes sense.
So if we're not absorbing our food. So I've talked a lot about the eye microbiome. I actually wrote an article in Mind, Body, Green where I talked about that the eyes have their own microbiome and that contact lens wearers and people that are on digital devices have a lowered ocular microbiome, so they're going to be more susceptible to inflammation and eye disease and dry eye. And what can you do to boost the ocular microbiome? Of course, we know what we can do in our intestinal health, but what can we do in terms of our eye health in that way? So macular degeneration is number one. Number two is cataracts. More and more people are developing cataracts. That's a problem with metabolic waste that accumulates in the lens of the eye. And, that has secondary issues with the possibility of not processing, our sugars very well, or eating too much sugar, too many carbs and sugars and gluten. Those things kind of exacerbate cataract formation. And then the third condition is dry eye syndrome, where people's corneas are drying out, and that's an endocrine system issue, and also an environmental toxic issue. And then, of course, we've got glaucoma, and we've got all these eye diseases, and those are probably the ones that are most prevalent, the things that I'm getting back in when I'm communicating with people all over the world.
Right. And, when, like, for example, let's just take the screen and the light, because I know that I generally see and feel better when I go down, I go outside and I see the sun. It's one of the reasons why I moved to Hawaii, because I lived in New Jersey where it's winter 10 months of the year or cloudy. So when I go out and I'm down at the beach or just, out on my lanai and I'm looking at the sun, my eyes feel so much better and so much healthier. And I feel like I can see so much farther. Is that wishful thinking on my part? Or, or is there something to, sunlight that generates better vision, specifically the spectrum of sunlight?
Well, the first statement I would make is that light is a food, and our eyes are one of the major portals where we get the light into our eyes, and there's a pathway that takes the light and activates the pineal gland, the pituitary, the hypothalamus. So we are like plants. We're heliotropic. We go towards the light. And yes, light is a very important nutrient for the body. Many years ago, when I was in practice in the Northeast, I learned a process called treating people with light therapy. So giving them different colors of light that they would look at in these light machines that I used actually improved their peripheral vision, their depth perception, their learning, their mood. We also know from many research studies of something called seasonal affective disorder,
exactly.
which you're referring to. Exactly. And so, when you live in Hawaii or, more towards the equator, you don't have to really think about it. But it is really important that you get at least 30 minutes of natural light every day, because it resets the pineal and the circadian rhythms. So when we are on our digital devices after 6 or 7 at night, the blue light from that actually shuts down the melatonin, and it creates an irregularity in our sleep cycle. This is why I promote something called blue blocker lenses, which actually block the blue light so that it doesn't suppress the melatonin, and it also protects our macula. So keep getting that light. It's really important. Now, there's definitely, the moderation of it. So especially in Hawaii, because I spend a lot of time in Hawaii, you can wear good sunglasses that block the UVA and UVB. Go out before the light gets, too high in the sky in, sunrise, sunset. Those are safer times to get the light. But I'm a real promoter of light into the eyes and into the body as part of our health. There's something called malillumination, like malnutrition. This was coined by somebody called John Ott, who was an inventor, and he worked a lot with photography. He coined this term. So if we don't get enough light in our eyes, then we have something called malillumination, like malnutrition. So, light is a very important nutrient for our vision.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say about, the circadian rhythms too, because this is something I learned when my daughter was little, and there were days where we just couldn't get out of the house, because between the meals and the diapers, it's just, you have like 10 minutes to go outside, if that, and a lot of times it was dark. But I passed by a yard sale, and this woman was selling a full spectrum lamp. And on those days in particular, what I found out was that when we would read in the evening by that full spectrum light, we would all sleep better.
Yes, of course.
And it really, even though it was that light was being taken in at night, she would go to sleep without a fuss. I would sleep through the night. It made a world of difference.
There's no question that one of the issues, there have been studies that have been done that people work the night shift, like nurses and factory workers. They have a lowered immune system. They even have a higher risk for things like cancer. So that, the light is so important in our resetting our body. And yet there is that conversation out there that we need to be afraid of the light.
I was just about to bring that up too.
And, there is certainly fair-skinned people and people that are more susceptible to skin cancer and things like that. Okay, you protect yourself. I'm very moderate in that, but I'm also here to say we need every day a dosage of natural light. Get out there. Even if you close your eyes and point your face to the sun, there's an exercise called sunning that I have on my website where your eyes are closed and you're just rocking your head very slowly back and forth, taking the rays in. So even though your eyes are closed, the eyelids are allowing some of the light into your eyes. That's a wonderful relaxation exercise.
Right. Now, related to sunlight, because you're like you said, we're being told to stay out of the light and, the skin cancer and so on. Is there any effect of the sunscreens? How, in other words, the way that the body itself would normally take in the sunlight, is there anything that the sunscreen is doing to interfere with that on the eye level?
Oh, well, that's a really good question. I think indirectly it is. It's interesting. One of the modalities I use is essential oils. And in aromatherapy, when people start using essential oils, a lot of times toxicities get pushed out through the skin. And the skin is kind of one of the dumping grounds for toxicity in the body. Now, when you're talking about sunscreen and it interacts with your chemistry of the body, a lot of times it's actually exacerbating or stimulating more of a toxicity response. So you really need to be careful about what you're putting on your skin as what you think a protective mechanism is. And since, in Chinese medicine, we know that the liver and the eyes go together, the liver actually rules the eyes in acupuncture, that a lot of times if we have heavy metal toxicity, it affects the eyes, and it also will start showing up in the skin if we do some kind of a detoxification process. So, you have to really educate yourself about what you are putting on the skin, because a lot of those sunscreens have worse things in it that just kind of make the problem worse.
Right. And you actually just stole the words out of my mouth, because I was going to ask you about liver stagnation and vision. And, things that people can do to support the liver, and obviously avoiding unnecessary toxins.
Well, yes. I mean, I just did a video on my Facebook page on dental health and eye health. And I talked a lot about even things like mercury amalgams or root canals, periodontal disease. Any kind of inflammation or infection in the mouth is going to affect the eyes. So you've got both the infection inflammatory issue and then the mercury in your mouth. All of those things are going to contribute to reducing your eye health, creating more oxidative stress in the retina. The retina has one of the highest metabolic needs of the body, and the macula has the highest metabolic need of the retina. And a lot of the eye problems that I'm seeing today are because of oxidative stress. We don't have enough energy on a cellular level to push the metabolic waste away from those sensitive areas like the cornea, the lens, and the macula. Even things like floaters is another one where people are saying, geez, my floaters are getting worse. And a lot of times it's connected to both oxidative stress, inflammation, and toxicities that are accumulating in the eyes.
Right. How does, you made me think of, in another life, and I guess I still sometimes do it, I dance, and and often I spin, and often I get really, really dizzy. I always attributed that to a kidney fluid balance issue, because I am known to be prone to that. In your opinion, how does, do the kidneys play a role? Maybe is the best way to say that.
The kidney-lung meridian really affects our lymph system for sure. But there's another thing that I'll just, say in terms of what the possibility is, and that is that in the brain, we have something in the inner ear called the vestibular system. And the vestibular system and the visual system are married. They work together. They work off each other in terms of movement and balance. I learned this many years ago. I was actually trying to start my practice, couldn't get any patients because I was in Philadelphia. That's where I started my first practice. And I was surrounded by all these allopathic eye practices. So I went to one of the local hospitals and I said to the physiatrist, I have this physical therapy that I think could help your trauma patients, brain trauma. And he said, sure, come on in. And within 3 months, I was getting really, really great results with these folks. And they all had problems with balance, double vision, memory issues. And I made the connection at that point between the vestibular system and the visual system. So one of the ways you can test your vestibular system is with your eyes closed, see how long you can balance on one foot. And that will tell you if you fall over within 10 seconds, you are over visually stimulated in your balancing and understimulated in your vestibular piece. So you start practicing with balancing with eyes closed to bring the vestibular visual into balance. And when you spin like you're doing, you are really activating that vestibular system and the fluid in the inner ear. I also think it's affecting, yes, kidney, lung, lymph system as well. But I think the conversation of bringing the vestibular into this is important for people, especially if they've had any kind of head trauma, car accidents, or they've fallen. That's why many years ago I went back to massage school and I became a craniosacral therapist because I saw the connection of how the bones in the head move and how we see, how our eyes focus. So as I began doing craniosacral on people, I found their eyesight got better. So there was that connection of the eye-brain, but I was working through the more neuromuscular or the structural part. And so for most craniosacral people, like acupuncturists, they don't realize how much the eyes are involved in that process. So I see I'm a bridge. I bridge to all these different professions, all of Feldenkrais, Alexander technique, yoga, what I do, Continuum, which is a movement therapy, to bridge and educate all of these folks that there is a holistic part to our visual system, and here it is. Use it.
Right. Yeah. And I used to live in Trenton, and spend a lot of time in Philly, and I wish I knew you back in the day. And, cause I would have been like the first online, to visit with you because, I was involved in a car accident. The spinning dizziness preceded that, but still went to a lot of craniosacral, Feldenkrais, acupuncture, chiropractic, and 50 grand later, still in the same place. Just really didn't do none of the people that I worked with were familiar enough with the breadth of what was going on, and so we're really just falling into that trap of seeing each system independently.
I just want to give a shout out to all my mentors because I was very early in my career, and all these doctors were in their 70s, and they wanted to teach me these methods. And one of the biggest things that I learned from them is that we need to treat the whole person. And so when somebody comes to you, and this is what I teach with when I do trainings for other doctors, is how can we look at the macro? And then within the macro, how can we plug in with these different things? Because you're right, there's a specialist. You go to the specialist and it's fragmented. It's just, we're going to do this tiny bit here, tiny bit there. And one of my nicknames is called Whole Health, that I'm a whole health optometrist and more of a naturopathic doctor where the eyes are part of the whole person. And I think that that's sometimes what's missing in some of the medical treatments. I mean, I've heard this story that you're sharing, thousands of times. Mm-hmm. And it's too bad because if you stay in your canyon of specialty, then you're not seeing the whole person and it's not going to stick. It's not going to hold. One of the things that I learned many years ago, and you'll so relate to this, is that it really starts with what's going on with our dietary absorption, what's happening on a cellular level. Because if we don't have the energy to absorb what we're doing, you can give a person the fanciest therapy in the world, but if they have a nutrition imbalance and they're not absorbing their foods and their nutrients, then they're not available to make the changes we're asking them to make. So I always start there. What do you eat? What's your diet? What's your digestion like? We kind of put it together and try to help that first before we start any therapies. And I'm sure you have a lot to say about nutrition. It's number one on my list that we need to work on that initially before we start doing all these other things.
And I'm so glad that you say that, because I feel like if you're not putting the right fuel in, it doesn't matter what the rest of it. It's like changing the tire on your car, but the problems with the transmission. It's not gonna, it's not really, it doesn't really make sense.
Well, I tell you, on Facebook, the biggest views I get are about diet soda, sugar, fast food, obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, and heart disease. I mean, these are the issues that people are dealing with, and we're not talking about really changing our diet and eating more plant-based and, non-GMO and getting away from even the plant killer, that
glyphosate,
that creates that inflammatory response. So, I think you and I are beating the same drum, and more of the doctors in functional medicine are speaking that way. And this is where we need to go, in my opinion. I gave a workshop a few years ago to a group of doctors. And at the beginning of the workshop, I said to them, there are 200 of them in the room. And I said, how many here take vitamins? And they all raised their hands. How many here recommend vitamins for their patients?
Nobody. Yeah, exactly.
And I said to the group, why aren't you learning about these recommendations? And flatline. The main thing that doctors are doing in the eye care thing is they're saying, we're going to watch the condition. Really? You're going to watch it? Won't you want to do something proactive? Here, just eat more spinach and kale and Brussels sprouts and broccoli, something. But, there's just a disconnect in terms of the eyes and nutrition that, again, it's another promotion that I'm really advocating. Because food can be our medicine, and with the state of healthcare, it's disease care, it's not healthcare. What can we do to take our health back? And, I think learning how to eat differently and being more of an advocate about, look, I want organic food, I want non-GMO, I want to do plant-based, those kinds of things that you and I probably agree upon. And in Hawaii, I know going to those farmers markets, it's awesome. So, here you go. Let's just talk about nutrition for a while.
Right. Exactly. And, unfortunately, when it comes to nutrition, everybody eats, so everybody thinks they know. And I always say, you have to know a lot about a topic before you realize how much you don't know. Because, you can, if you've never studied, if the most research you've done into nutrition is, reading the internet or just the free magazines at the health food store, you're not necessarily getting the entire scope of possibility. Before, I'm going to have to let you go soon, but before we go, I have a listener who just sent me this, last night, I believe it was, or the day before yesterday. And I'll read it to you. I've been having problems with my eyesight for some time, but wrongly thought this was due to some minor brain damage, which I don't know what that means. Unfortunately, things took a turn for the worse this week, and I have now been diagnosed with glaucoma in both eyes. I have already lost 30% in my left eye. They have put me on eye drops to lower pressure in my eyes. Is there anything else you can suggest I do?
Okay. Yes, of course. So glaucoma, the key in glaucoma, basically what glaucoma is the pressure inside the eyes start to go up. So the eyes have this really intricate circulation system where nutrients are pumped in and out of the eye through a meshwork. And what happens in glaucoma is somewhere along the line that meshwork gets clogged up, the pressure starts to rise up. And the biggest thing that he can do is really start amping up his omega-3 fish oil, especially the DHA part of it, because there's studies out there that show that as you increase your DHA, that's the part of the omega-3 that actually increases or grows the brain. Mm-hmm. And so protecting the optic nerve with more fats, good fats, coconut oil, maybe MCT oil, nuts and seeds. I would probably reduce carbs, no sugar, reduce gluten. I might consider things like craniosacral therapy. There's actually something called the rebounder where you can jump gently on the that actually can bring your eye pressure down.
So by extension of that, sorry to cut you off, would something like, although I'm not a huge fan of running, would something like that or other kinds of exercise recreate something similar to a rebounding experience if they don't have it?
Studies out there that, getting 20 to 30 minutes of aerobic exercise, whatever, I don't know the state of his joints and, his neuro, it could be walking, it could be swimming, but the aerobic exercise, yes, would be very important. And of course, getting a really good eye nutrient with lutein, zeaxanthin, beta carotene. Taurine is a really important amino acid and antioxidant for the optic nerve. Bilberry is a very important herbal formula that brings more retinal circulation to the eyes. Color therapy can sometimes help expand the peripheral vision. Eye exercises are also can reduce the stress and open up the circulation. So I would have him get into my community, Dr. Sam Berne Facebook. I'm actually doing a free webinar next Saturday that he could plug into and start getting information. I've done so many videos and some on glaucoma that could benefit him. One of the things I've realized about glaucoma is sometimes it starts in the brain. Because it actually is a constriction in the brain, but we're seeing reflected in the eyes. So That's interesting that he had that issue with it. And the other piece about glaucoma that I've seen is that it can mask as having neurotoxicities. So that if you do the hawks, a lot of times the nerve will get better, the peripheral vision will get better. So working with a naturopath and saying, do I have any neurotoxicities? Does he have mercury in his mouth? Or has he been exposed to toxicities? So these are all things that show up as glaucoma because the eye drops are treating a symptom. There's lots of side effects to it. And then they want to do iridectomies and those procedures, which can cause secondary glaucoma and other things. You don't want to go down that road. So I would have him jump on my bandwagon, start, plugging into what I'm promoting, because there's so many things that he could do, at the very least, to slow it down and neutralize the deterioration.
Right. That's fantastic. I was doing a little bit of research, and one of the books that I picked up was, I go on these, explorations into the old time nutritionists. And so I was reading Adele Davis, and she was pretty amazing because she had, a therapy for pretty much everything that we think is new today or, for example, can't be, fixed. And one of the things she was saying about glaucoma is, the stress relationship. And that for a lot of people, when they have glaucoma, they may even go into temporary blindness when they get put under extreme stress. But so a lot of her protocol, and she claimed at the time, this is, we're looking back in like the 1960s, that she had never had a patient not turn around by essentially supporting the adrenals, with things like, brewer's yeast, liver, eliminating coffee. You talked about the sugars. Is there any validity to that?
Of course there's validity because, the eyes and the brain are so sensitive to what we eat. And again, the more plant-based natural foods that we eat, that's going to help us. And, when you talk about stress, what happens in our visual system when we get under stress, we start tunneling, we start narrowing. That's what nearsightedness is. We are excluding our periphery because we're in a fight or flight freeze response in a hypervigilance. And so what we need to do is some stress reduction activities, exercises, and what will happen is our peripheral vision opens way up. So, of course, the parasympathetic nervous system is not activating. We're in this stress response. Our cortisol is off the charts. Again, the eyes are reflecting. When we have an eye problem, it's reflecting some imbalance in systemic and metabolic and nutritional health.
Right. And for some reason, I just made the connection between the liver she's recommending and the liver, because we touched on the Chinese concept of liver stagnation. And in Chinese medicine, Chinese dietetics, you would eat liver to support your liver. That would be your primary, most rapid, according to my teacher back in New York, it would have been the most rapid response to get for your eyes or, for liver health would be to actually eat the liver of another animal.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert in that, so I'm going to kind of recuse myself in that. but I do think that, again, some system, whether it's the acupuncture system, Ayurveda is another system, find somebody who's more whole body, who can, help you, guide you. There's the ketogenic diet, there's the paleo diet, there's the Mediterranean style diet. So it's just where you plug in. But I definitely think what you eat is going to affect your eye health profoundly.
Okay, well, I hope you hear that, Chris. And so I'm going to have to let you go because I know that you're busy. You've got patients, and you said you're preparing for a webinar next Saturday. That is the 15th?
I think it's the 16th.
Okay.
And,
yes.
If you go to my Facebook page, Dr. Sam Berne, it's right at the top, so you can sign in. It's free. I'm also going to be doing a Facebook Q&A after, which is free as well. And it'll be recorded, so if you can't make it, that's okay. You can plug into it. And my website is drsamberne.com, and get in with my community, and I'm happy to share all that I know. And I so appreciate your time and your invitation, and I want to come and see you next time I'm in Hawaii.
Yeah, you're literally. As a matter of fact, I lived a block away from where you were. Where you were. But let me just let everybody know that Dr. Sam Berne is spelled DrSamberne.com.
Say hi to all the whales and dolphins. I know it's a very active time there, and enjoy. It's a great place to be.
Yeah, well, I would love to have you down, and hopefully I will have regenerated my garden by the time you come down again. My property is desert, but I've got goats out there doing some work and chickens doing some work, and so we'll turn it around and it'll be a little sanctuary.
Oh, great, beautiful.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know you're busy, and I will let you go.
Okay, Adrian.
Okay, till the next time.
Okay.
Aloha.
The Nutrition Heretic Podcast is a production of Savor the Journey, LLC. Our audio editor is Nicola Popovich. Our podcast manager is Crystal McLean, and our operations manager is Michelle Med. I'm your host, Adrian Hugh, the Nutrition Heretic. You can find us at the new and improved nutritionheretic.com, where you can download the Nutrition Heretic's free shit list of 7 health foods to avoid like the plague. You can also listen to previous episodes at nutritionheretic.com/podcast. Be sure to like us on social media for updates. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/nutritionheretic and on Twitter @NutriHeretic. Contact us with show ideas, questions, or if you want to be a guest. And don't forget to rate our podcast on iTunes and Stitcher.